Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. On behalf of USAID, Feed the Future, and ANGLAIS, I welcome you to our webinar, Strengthening Livestock Systems Through Climate-Smart and Gender-Sensitive Approaches. I am Michael Saltz with ANGLAIS. Before we begin, let me orient you to the BlueJeans platform. On the right side of your screen, you'll see most of your controls. Please use the chat to introduce yourself and network with colleagues from around the world. To ask questions, please use the Q&A button on the bottom right. Indicate who your question is for, and feel free to upvote questions you want answered. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, and our Q&A session will be at the end of the event. If the presentation is too small on your screen, you can use the slide bar at the bottom of the window to adjust the view. Lastly, we are recording this webinar and will email you the post-event resources as soon as they are available. You can also find the resources at agrilinks.org when they are posted. Thank you so much for your attention. I will now pass it to USAID's Emma Bratton.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Emma Bratton. I am a livestock veterinarian and American Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology Policy Fellow at USAID. I sit in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security in the Center for Agriculture-Led Growth, and I help manage the Livestock Systems Innovation Lab. I also have a coordinating role in the Agricultural Threats Working Group and One Health Working Group, and I sit on the Bureau's Gender Tiger team. This webinar is part of Livestock Month on AgriLinks. Specifically, our theme for this month is livestock as a key solution for the climate crisis and women's empowerment. To support this theme, we wanted to highlight Feed the Future efforts to strengthen animal feed, fodder, and forage production and feeding approaches as a major solution for the climate crisis and women's empowerment. This includes highlighting how increasing livestock production can achieve the co-benefits of increased resilience, sustainable economic growth, and nutrition security for vulnerable populations, especially women. That said, we also want to acknowledge that livestock production leads to externalities that we will work to mitigate in order to optimize the benefits of livestock to people in low and middle income countries. During the rest of this month, we are also soliciting an open call for questions on AgriLinks related to this panel and livestock and international development generally. And I will post the link for that Google form in the chat so that you can post your questions if you would like. So next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So to signpost this panel, we will start with a presentation by Dr. Ermias Kabrab from UC Davis discussing livestock contributions to greenhouse gas emissions, and specifically methane, and how ration formulation and feed additives for cattle can help decrease methane emissions. We will follow that with a presentation by Judy Odongo discussing the Feed the Future Kenya crops and dairy market systems activities success and achieving the co-benefits of reducing methane emissions while increasing production for dairy cattle via improved nutrition. This, in turn, led to increased income generation and availability of nutritious animal-sourced foods for women and youth in the region. Next, Nelson Owanji will then discuss how using the GIRL, which stands for Girls Improving Resilience Through Livelihoods model, has used livestock production as a way to build capacities and improve livelihoods in the face of drought in northern Kenya. Finally, Nurul Siddiqui from the Bangladesh Mission will discuss how their Feed the Future livestock and nutrition activity helps to increase the empowerment of women involved throughout the livestock value chain. He will also discuss how livestock act as a source of resilience from climate shocks and reiterate how improved diet formulations help conserve land and decrease emissions intensity for livestock. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Kabrab.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about mainly livestock methane emissions and what opportunities we have to reduce those emissions. Next slide, please. So if you look at it globally, what is the contribution of different sectors around the world? And the energy sector is about 75% or 3/4 of the emissions coming around the world is from the energy sector. And from agriculture is the second largest, which is about 18% or so. So this is basically the whole of agriculture. And if you look at, if you break it down from different sectors of agriculture, we see that livestock and manure about almost 6%, and then we have agricultural soils, rice, cultivation, crop burning, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. If you then look at the methane breakdown from livestock, from each of the different animals or livestock species, we see that in beef systems, most of it is from the front end, or it is the enteric emissions that makes up the most of the emissions, while in a dairy it's about 50-50, mainly because a lot of dairy systems, they use things like lagoons to collect the manure, and therefore the manure will have a contribution to methane emissions as well. While in pork, again, it's mostly the manure, as they are non-ruminants and they don't have the methanogens within their gut to convert it into methane. Next, please. So we have a lot of different types of mitigation strategies, and this could range from looking into the adult animal itself, so direct inhibition of methanogenesis using things like anti-methanogen inhibitors or even vaccines, or it could be an indirect method through the adult animal, and that could be changing the chemical composition of the diet, increasing the amount of lipids in the diet, and providing alternative metabolic pathways so that you can take away hydrogen from the methanogens into a different route, and then using some sort of antimicrobials as well. There have also been efforts to do some defaunation, or to basically modulate the rumen microbiome. And lately there's an increased interest in breeding animals that are low methane emitting animals. This has been quite successful in the case of sheep, but there's more work that's been done in cattle because of the time it takes for cattle is longer. We'll see this is a long-term strategy, but this is part of the whole strategy to reduce methane emissions from ruminants. Next slide, please. And when we see that, by changing those the diets, looking into the nutrition and genetics and all that, there has been quite a big reduction in emissions already. This is an analysis that was done to compare the emissions in California in dairy cattle from the 1960s to the 2000s. And what you see here is that on the red bar is the 1960s, and then the blue and the gray bars are on the 2014 using different assumptions. And in both cases, you see that there was quite a drastic reduction in emissions associated with dairy production. In terms of the feed production, there's quite a big reduction, and that's because we now have better genetics for crops. We have better yields, so we don't use as much inputs into the system to get the same yield. Farm management has reduced, and a big reduction in enteric methane emissions, and that's because we have increased the productivity of those animals. So per kilogram of milk that we are producing, we have really reduced those emissions. So by this estimate, almost 50% reduction in enteric methane emissions because of the improvements that we've done in particularly in increasing the milk production through genetics as well as through nutrition and management. Next, please. And this is now we're trying to translate this in a number of countries around the world, and that is done through putting together a ration formation software that is available in the language where you want to use it, and also for different species. For example, here you see you can formulate diets for countries like Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Cambodia, Laos, Nigeria, and Vietnam, and they have associated diets and ingredients that are based from those countries that they are being used. So it's very much targeted, and all people who have to do then is choose your country, choose your language, choose the animal you want to formulate for, and then you get a diet formulation. And one of the things that has helped in all over the world, particularly in Europe and US, has been the use of these nutrition models, this software to formulate rations. And so the USAID is trying to do the same thing and provide tools for people to be able to use it. And these tools are being converted into mobile apps so that the access to those tools would be a lot easier as the smartphone use among farmers, among extension agents is increasing, then the uptake of this will increase as well. Next, please. And the other way of reducing methane emissions, directly reducing methane emissions, is using feed additives. There has been a number of feed additives that has been looked at, researched, and this continues now. This is a very active area of research, and this is basically using a very small amount of a feed additive to reduce the amount of methane that's been emitted. So, for example, there's a number of experiments that was done using seaweed. It's a specific type of seaweed that has shown to reduce emissions by up to 80%. There are others called 3-NOP or bovire or secondary plant compounds that are available in tropical countries. Oregano and tannins, and lemongrass, for example, contains a lot of tannins. Using nitrate and using other feed additives have been shown to reduce emissions quite a bit as well. So this is a way for farmers to be able to reduce their emissions. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the livestock industry has already made quite a big progress in sustainability when we compare it over in the last 50 years. But we need to do this all over the world. So this has happened in the US and in Europe, but we need to make this happening all over the world. And we can use this. We can do it in a couple of ways. One is the improving feed efficiency, using ration formulation software, improving the forage availability and the type of forage that's been grown as well, or using feed additives as well, or a combination of both of those methods will help us achieve that as well. So next slide, please. And thank you for your attention, and happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Ermias. Judy Odongo is going to speak next.
So good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take what the first presenter has done and narrowing it down to a case of the Kenya Crops and Dairy Market Systems activity, where we have been doing a lot of work in dairy. And part of it is actually improving cattle nutrition and how that has contributed to methane emissions and women economic empowerment. Next slide, please. That is just an overview of where the Kenya Crops and Dairy activity has focused in Kenya. We are focused on in 12 counties, as you can see. And just for all of us to know, these are the places where dairy was quite pre-commercialized. So we're really building the market systems from nascent. Next slide, please. So this is a young woman. We love her so much. She worked, they finished college together with her brother. They didn't get employment, so went back to the village, asked for space. They started doing yogurt processing, collecting milk from like 20 farmers. We met them at that point where they're just struggling. So all this equipment and the branding and what you see here is actually through the partnership with the USAID Kenya Crops and Dairy. And today, her and her brother are now employed by their business. They've also employed 11 people. They work with over 100 farmers, and those 100 farmers have also benefited from interventions towards increased nutrition, improved nutrition, so are contributing to the results I'm going to share in a bit. Next slide, please. So when we started our work in the dairy space, there were many challenges with farmer starting from production all the way to the markets. Biggest is limited quality, limited access to quality feed and fodder, as well as just being able to use it properly. But the herd sizes are small. In fact, at any one time, from our surveys, a farmer has just 1 to 2, lactating cows. The production was very low. They are not aggregating. So all these challenges that we have with the farmer, the cows are also, low grade. So we've done a lot of things, as going to present in the next slide. Next slide, please. So we because of those many challenges, we coined interventions for the dairy sector, and working together with the International Livestock Research Institute and other stakeholders in the dairy space, interventions around market linkages, improved breeding and animal health, extension and advisory services, and quality fodder and fodder production and commercialization. We also did some work in industry standards on feed and animal nutrition, and a lot of work in input supply, especially supplements. Other interventions at higher level have included working with the Ministry of Livestock to develop and disseminate, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock to develop and disseminate harmonized dairy cattle nutrition extension material. Again, this informed by a study I'm just going to talk about. And we are also currently doing something with the East Africa Grain Council and the East Africa Community on developing standard animal nutrition standards that would actually set, pace for implementation of better nutrition standards across the region. Next slide, please. So our work in dairy, as I have just shown, has seen us work with 58 private sector partners, including that young girl we saw up there. 42 of them women co-own them. We have seen 1,200 jobs created, again in that sector, 34% women, jobs to women. We have worked with 191 farming households, 191,000, 56% women. We have seen sales of both milk and milk products and feed and fodder, because we worked in feed and fodder also as a market system to just develop the fodder market system, and we are seeing close to 150 million in sales. Again, you can see the percentages that are going to women and girls. And I just put this one thing here, which is very dear to the women. There's been increased consumption of milk at the household level. I'll leave the overview of the work we've done in KCDMS, and people can follow later. So next slide, please. So we carried out a study in 2019 was the baseline, and we did the end line sometime mid last year. And this study was around, helping us to understand if improving dairy nutrition would actually increase milk productivity, but also contribute to methane emissions. And so, first of all, just building up on what the other presenter has done. Methane emissions from dairy cattle, we have 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions from livestock, 20% of livestock greenhouse gas emissions is from dairy, and 80% of dairy greenhouse gases from developing countries. So that is just like the global picture. Next slide, please. So after conducting these studies, baseline in 2019, endline in 2022, mid, with the same farmers in the same geographies. The findings, this is just part of the findings, really highlights is that milk productivity increased by 43%. This is so much contributed to by increased nutrition of dairy cattle, and 60% increase in sales for the farmers, which is a big thing. And then we saw methane intensity decrease at 27% for each liter of milk produced, and this is a huge thing, and there's potential to even double that if practices are just intensified. That turns into like 43% from extrapolation, 43,000 cows that are under good practice of dairy practices that is contributing to methane emissions, and you can see the figures. So a big leap there in contributing to decreased methane. Next slide, please. So what are the implications here? The implications are that agricultural productivity gains can mitigate methane emissions while also increasing food security. That is one of the big things we just were able to contribute to. And then scaling adoption of improved practices is key to methane emissions. Again, this is really aligning to the first presenter. And of course, investing in dairy and improved nutrition for cows is also contributing to women economic empowerment as we have demonstrated. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to me. Happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Judy. Nelson Owanji will speak next.
Nelson, are you here with us?
Sorry about that, everyone. I think we'll hop on over to Nurul, and we will return back to Nelson when he rejoins. So we will skip ahead to Nurul's slides. Just a moment, Nurul. Thank you. We are preparing your slides.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks, everyone. Welcome to this presentation of today's webinar. My name is Nurul Siddiqui, and I'm an ACD advocacy for party. We are implementing the 5-year Feed the Future Bangladesh Livestock and Nutrition activity aims to sustainably increase livestock productivity, marketability of livestock products, and household consumption of safe and diversified livestock products in 23 southern districts of Bangladesh. We focus on access to finance, adoption of ICT tools, and gender and youth inclusion issues. Our activity targets 1 million cattle and goat owning households across the life of the activity. Before we jump into some of the specific sort of approaches we use in terms of the livestock production, gender and climate change, I would like to start with a quick poll. Let's see, what do you think? Why do Bangladeshi farmers rear livestock? Is that for land cultivation, family consumption, income, to cope with natural disasters, or to give as wedding presents and gifts? Please vote. Okay, moving to the results. Yeah, thank you very much for your participation. I see that, a lot of votes has come for income, which is very true. Family consumption as well. And it's interesting that many of you has also highlighted as wedding gifts and presents. It does happen that in rural Bangladeshi households, during the marriage of their daughter, cows and goats actually does go as wedding gifts and as an asset for that. The important point that I wanted to highlight is that Bangladeshis does use the livestock assets to cope with natural disasters as well. To the next slide, please. Okay, so I echo with my fellow presenters that we need to take more actions to reduce the environmental impact of livestock activities. But I also, I'm a strong believer of the phrase that, livestock is also needs to be part of the solution, especially when, millions of people's livelihood and nutrition is dependent on livestock, which is the case for Bangladesh. Household lives near coasts and river and islands represents the most vulnerable, yet the most significant owners of large and small ruminants. And cattle and goats are considered as one of the most significant assets, not just during emergencies, but also, it is evident that how income from livestock directly impact education and well-being of these vulnerable families. And livestock also play a very important role in nutrition, where malnutrition in Bangladesh is heavily linked with dietary patterns. And more than half of the children, adolescents, and women consume diets, oftentimes which are not adequately diversified. So animal source food have an irreplaceable role in diversifying the diet for getting optimal nutrition. In the next few slides, we would like to share, our activity approaches to sustainably intensify livestock production and marketing, as well as driving consumption alongside livelihoods. Next slide, please. So for this project, one of the most significant efforts we did in the first 16 months is to address a challenge which is very common to Bangladesh because it's a small country, it's 1/5 size of Kenya. But it's to also therefore land are very scarce, and Bangladesh is I think they're very well known for not leaving an inch of land unproductive. But I think the main challenge was to look into ways how technologies such as highly productive and highly producing resistant varieties like cuttings and seeds of high producing saline food and flood and drought resilient forage varieties can be disseminated widely. And we have worked closely with Bangladesh Livestock Research Institute, utilize their research stations and dairy companies to disseminate them in scale to fodder entrepreneurs and farmers. And this is very important for the adaptation of the region. And what we have seen, like 22% of over nearly 500 fodder entrepreneurs who receive this capacity building services from the project are women. And a quarter of these entrepreneurs are also youth who are able to demonstrate the year-round productivity solution to farmers. And the result was that both the entrepreneurs and farmers have shown high willingness to pay for these forage varieties. 37% of all the livestock service providers who received capacity building support from the activity partners are youth and received training on low emission interventions such as ration formulation based on farm byproducts, combination of quality forage, and also local solutions to improve farm production. So during the first year, we are also able to roll out a number of co-investment projects with private sectors to improve the productivity and marketability aspects of the milk and meat production. And the gender, youth, and social inclusion approaches therefore help to build capacity for these enthusiastic entrepreneurs on CSA practices, and it actually went beyond women's and youth role as farmers and just their role as farmers, but also we have seen how productive and decision making could be impacted as a result of these approaches. Next slide, please. So the activity gender and inclusion strategies to empower women and youth to and engage them into higher value livestock sector work, reducing societal barriers to become livestock service providers, and helping market system actors see the benefit of investing into them. Our partnership with private sector animal breeding service providers in year one has increased the opportunity for women and youth to become successful insemination workers, which were not very common. However, initial results shown that increased number of services provided by them already to farmers, but then private partners also shared their excitement around the insemination success rate achieved by this network of inseminators, in particular for native breeds, which are more resilient to local climates, such as the red Chittagong cattle and black Bengal goats. And these breeds also require least resources to manage, and they're less prone to disease as well. And by all means, they're more climatically adaptive to the local situation. Next slide, please. So some of the takeaways, and it was really encouraging to see some of the results that from the higher farm income and uptake of CSA practices reported. When women were the prime decision maker on particular farm expenditures. The activity annual survey, over 1,200 farm respondents showed the uptake of improved technology and management practices, such as establishment of vaccination and deworming services, feeding supplement with concentrates, improved forage feeding, such as silage, farm manure management, and higher uptake rates for these climate-friendly farm practices were observed when farm expenditure decisions were made by women members as opposed to the men members of the household. The activity partner biodigester companies has also shared their enthusiasm with increased biodigester unit sales, saying that the ever-increasing cost of energies, many households does realize the potential of biogas generated from a 3 cattle-owned farm and can significantly increase the income and well-being potential of the of the rural households. So with that, I would like to thank you for your patience hearing, and we look forward to to the next sessions. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Nurul. I think that Nelson has rejoined, so if you can, we can go back to his slides.
Thank you. My name is Nelson Owange, and I will be talking about how the GAL model has used livestock production as a way to build capacities and improve livelihoods in the face of drought in northern Kenya. And so this is one of the activities which is USA Feed the Future funded, implemented in the northern part of the country bordering, of course, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And so GAL is, next slide, please. So GAL is an acronym which means Girls Improving Resilience Through Livelihoods. And this model is an improved version of an initial model which was actually Girls Improving Resilience Through Livestock. And at that moment, the thinking was specifically concentrated on livestock as an option for livelihoods for adolescent girls. And this is more of a safe space model, which is targeting adolescent girls, particularly aged 10 to 19 years of age, and young women, of course, 19 to 24 years of age. The model enables the girls to go through at least 9 months of psychosocial support, helping them to identify their aspirations as well as their journey to where they want to be. It identifies the different shocks and stresses and then helps them on how to help them build their capacities to those shocks and stresses. And this is an environment in which patriarchal system is still very key. And in this system, whereas there are adolescent girls, majority of whom have actually been married, and so they are also young mothers. And so what is important to note is that particularly when adolescent girls identify their aspirations, it's mainly going back to school, either primary, secondary, or tertiary, or a vocational training, and or starting a business, as a transition pathway. But when you push these aspirations further, and when girls begin to earn income, then livestock comes out as their bank account, their ATM, and their risk diversification matrix. And all businesses which are diversified come up to, apart from a lot of them in the livestock value chain, but also in concentrating their assets in livestock. So with the drought and particularly the impacts of climate change, we can move into the next slide. With drought and particularly the impacts of climate change, one of the things which is very important is particularly to continue livestock production and consumption, even in the face of that drought, and the availability of water, particularly, and pasture is key for that continuum, to take place. And so that required us to work with other community level structures, and those community level structures were able to support, communities particularly to have water sources, particularly the water pans, and those water pans. One of the key important things is the girls use those water sources to be able to grow pasture and particularly forages and also some crops, and the crop vines as well as those pastures became very important sources of feed for livestock. particularly the goats in this case. It was also very clear that the groups who had fodders and are also the groups in which you find their children were able to access those milk, and you would see a more healthier children in those groups which actually had fodder produced in the various water sources which were there. So we noted the importance of sustaining the water availability, and in order to sustain that, we worked closely with the private sector partners in northern Kenya. One of the private sector partners we handheld from the urban city center in Nairobi to go and be able to see the opportunities that exist in the northern part of the country. And when they see, groups which are willing to post-share establishment of water infrastructures, mainly solar irrigated water infrastructures, pumping them into farms and helping produce not only crops, but also pastures for livestock, then they were able to use that opportunity, also with some buying in from the county governments, and to be able to establish those irrigation systems, which actually enabled girls to have those fodder and grass. And so even the girls who diversified into livestock production as a livelihood opportunity were able actually to use
Sorry,
Nelson,
everybody. It appears that we lost Nelson momentarily. I think he's having a network issue. Nelson, if you can hear us, please maybe try and leave and rejoin. Thank you so much. Please pardon this brief interruption. We will be back shortly. In the meantime, I want to do a quick plug. I see we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, and I also just wanted to say that you can continue to ask questions after the event on agrilinks.org. We've got an open call for questions running, and I've just posted that in the event chat. So we are just waiting for our speaker to rejoin, and as soon as he's back, we'll continue with this presentation, and then just after that, we will be doing a Q&A session based on all of the questions that you have been asking throughout the event. Thank you once again for joining us today. We're just going to give Nelson another minute. Sorry, everybody. Just a quick reminder, this is not a sort of lost audio issue. We have just lost connection with Nelson. I think it's just a simple network issue, and we are working to resolve it, and he should be back online momentarily. But if we don't hear from him in another minute or so, then we'll just move straight over onto the Q&A. Thank you once again for joining us. And another quick plug, head over to agrilinks.org and check out all of the wonderful blogs that have been posted for our livestock month. We've gotten a lot of really excellent blog submissions. We're very proud of the collection that has been growing over there. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your patience.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us through these technical difficulties. We are going to go ahead and move to the Q&A, and hopefully Nelson can rejoin and help answer some of those questions. So there are some pre-written questions for all panelists to answer. So the first of which is, in light of the newly launched U.S. government strategy on global women's economic security, how do you see women's economic empowerment supporting the success of climate-smart livestock production in low and middle income countries moving forward?
Directed to anyone? Emma?
So yes, any of the panelists can go ahead and answer this question.
So Judy Odongo here. Just as we have demonstrated in the work that we have done in dairy, there's huge potential for women participation, both from production all the way to the markets, and they're involved in various areas in the chain. And even where you think women are not doing artificial insemination, now we have quite a number actually participating in service provision in that area, in extension. And so I think that if we just targeted, the nodes very well, and just, help the women especially be able to much more access the assets, that is where the challenge is. I think we are headed for a very vibrant, say, dairy sector where women are participating as well as the men are, even the youth actually, girls and youth boys as much. So the biggest challenge is asset. They just have challenges to access the finances. Their challenges are more than the challenges for men would be.
Emma, Siddiqui here. In relation to the strategy, I think the priority line of effort 3, which is about promoting entrepreneurship and financial and digital inclusion through investments of the new strategy, is very relevant in our context where livestock farmers were dominated by, let's say, women as key managers of those farms, and entrepreneurs also need access to markets, right? I think and finance, and I think they were evident through all 3 presentations. We started with digital innovations, right, and which are key to capacity building on climate smart livestock practices. The feeding app that Kebab was talking at the very beginning. But however, access to climate smart training and resources is not enough. So we also need voice or agency, women's agency, to be able to implement these livestock practices in their farms, and also the small businesses in their business parameters. So I think this is very, very relevant.
Great, thank you for those contributions. So the next question is, as we work to combat the wicked problem of climate change, what do you see as the importance of partnering with diverse, local, and US-based actors to ensure the continued health of humans, animals, and ecosystems?
If I can start with that, well, I think the ability to learn from each other. There's a lot of development that's happening all over the world, and it really applies in different situations, right? So there's no one solution to reduce the impact of livestock on climate change. There are different ways of doing that, and so working together would help in getting this thing moving forward. I give the example of the Russian information software, for example. We've learned a lot using that. So no farmer in the US or Europe would dream of feeding their animals without first formulating those diets, right? And so that's translating that and making sure that it is context appropriate. We're using the right ingredients from that country, from that, not just the country, but from the region as well. And also not just from that region, but also the seasons that those ingredients are available, and also including byproducts and all that. So by putting all this together and learning from each other, I think that would help us in improving their productivity and at the same time reducing the intensity of emissions as well.
So Emma, the context that I would respond to this question is just that the consultants that undertook the study, our dairy methane study, are actually dairy farmers themselves in America, really extensive dairy farmers, and they shared a lot of insights. Even as they interacted with us, they interacted with farmers in the cooperatives a lot, and so they'll just be sharing, a lot of things that could really just small things that could change, the landscape and change the way that farmers, are practicing their animal nutrition and the benefits that they gain from it. And of course, the bigger benefit, which is towards methane emission, and they were able to share a lot of, good information. And so just that cross learning, it was small, but it yielded a lot that we are replaying to the farmers, that has contributed to us working with the Ministry of Agriculture towards development of the, harmonized cattle, training, cattle nutrition training material. And we hope that then we can have, over time, harmonized information that is going, extension information that is going to the farmers. A lot of this is informed, of course, from the study, and a lot of it also, like, from what the experience was. The farm is called...
Go ahead, Judy.
Oh, sorry, I've been talking all this while and I was muted. Yeah, so I was saying that the two farms that, the farm that did our baseline and endline is a farm called Rumeth International, and it's run by two gentlemen who are also farmers in America, dairy farmers in America. They're really extensive. And so besides just undertaking the study, they, shared a lot of learning and a lot of what has worked for them, and what can, the farmers can do and change a little bit here and there. And those practices that could hugely contribute both to improve productivity, but also to increase methane emissions. Just things like even playing with the supplements, increasing calcium and things like those in the supplements that could make a huge change. So just there's a lot of value in cross learning, and as the other speaker said, it's not fixated, but it's when it happens and when you get to interact. So maybe platforms for farmers to just, or people to just learn from each other would really create positive impact. Thank you.
And I wanted to share one of our partnerships with an animal health company here in Bangladesh, where the One Health approach, has been a center of, I think, tension to look at issues such as the antimicrobial resistance and what are some of the actions that large companies can bring in terms of some of the behavior changes, and how can they use their convening power to establish many of those best practices in the system, and where all the human animal health as well as the ecosystem interact. So some of the initial sort of results that we have seen as a result of the diverse partnership is that even though there are initial fears of losing businesses, companies are also able to start new line of businesses, products those are critical to improve gut health. Also, some of the key interactions between how antibiotics are prescribed and how these behaviors gradually then affect the other behaviors at the farm level. So I think it's really key to reach out and to diverse set of partners. And also, I think linking to the first presentation, many of the technologies does really needs to be more available and applicable to the context we have in the developing countries. I'm sure, like many of the industry owners are also looking for those solutions, and therefore one of our key goals is to also demonstrate the value of these new technologies to the market actors when it comes to the overall issues about human health and animal health.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're going to move now to audience submitted questions. The first question is for Ermias. This is actually a group of questions that are related. Talking about what types of nutritionally improved fodder seeds or fodder crops specifically can reduce methane emissions for cattle.
Yeah, so there is a direct correlation between the amount of fiber in a forage and the methane emissions. So the lower the fiber in the forages, you will have lower methane emissions as well. But obviously, we have to make sure that there is enough fiber in the diet. Otherwise, there will be other issues that will be coming up as well. So yeah, I think the first thing is more digestible fiber, a better digestible fiber, digestible NDF or the neutral detergent fiber in the diet will improve the emissions. At the same time, higher amounts of lipids would also improve. Lipids do not get degraded in the rumen, so they don't contribute to methane emissions, but they contribute to the energy availability of the animal. So higher amount of lipids with lower fiber or better digestible feed with higher lipids will be the ones that will reduce methane emissions and also improve productivity at the same time.
Great, thank you. And thanks to those who submitted that question. So the next question is for Judy. Faith Awar, sorry if I mispronounced, asked, what are some of the improved dairy management practices that you promoted that have the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And Kawa Dodd asked a similar question.
Okay, so one just simple one was again, as you said, the previous speaker, is promotion of planting and farmers using, better quality grasses, like bracharia for feeding their animals. And then just discouraging farmers, for example, from using, things like maize stovers. Just like that, it's debatable, but yeah, from the advice again we got from the the experts, they said it doesn't help so much, especially except maybe it is used in silage or something like that. And just the right feeding regimes, and those are just part of the things. The bigger part was actually the grasses, quality grasses. And so there's a lot of growing of quality grasses and use of quality grasses. And the other one was use of supplements, and encouraging farmers to use calcium and use high energy, supplements also, in addition to the grasses. So those two are the bigger ones. Of course, there are many others. And my colleague Seth is also posting stuff on the wall.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Nurul. Brian Foster and Mubashra both asked about manure biodigesters and if these would be economically feasible for a small farmer or groups of farmers when the value of the manure is readily utilized by land application for crop production.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think in our context, the adoption of biodigesters I think we're seen in areas where areas dominated by aquaculture, for example, and there was a tendency of farmers to actually apply fresh manure to the spawns because there were otherwise no use of the manure, because aquaculture is the most dominated activity in that region. But so there is certainly, I think, technology like this can help process some of that fertilizers, and then utilization of that energy into the household system is great. But it's true that the cost of biodigesters, as they are now, certainly is a challenge. But realizing that, we also see that in many countries like in Bangladesh and India and elsewhere, these type of technologies are also promoted under a particular policies where certain amount of subsidies are offered to the actors. So you can also look at those models, which are often like a great way of engaging policymakers into expanding this type of technology, when we know that the cost for some time won't be reduced by much. So these were some of the I think examples that many can use to drive more financing into this type of climate smart activities. And with more sort of interest from the energy companies, I think there are more probably interest coming on the ground to take them to scale, which probably would have another opportunity to reduce that cost.
Thank you for that. So this next question or group of questions is for Judy and Nurul. So Alex Rujovic and several others asked about women and decision-making in livestock management, how the different projects addressed women's decision-making over livestock production, if there was any opposition from men to women making more decisions, in the sector, and if the project helped increase women's decision-making power.
So yeah, this is one issue that is always very, very interesting. What we have observed over time. So first of all, what we have observed is men own the cattle most of the time. Women do the work, the production work, and also women. We have seen that in most cases, women also own the milk for food. When the milk starts to become income generating and it's a lot, then men are interested. I think empowering women as well as men to understand the sector and the benefits in the dairy space just has enabled them be also an information hub, so that when the men have seen that they understand, because the women will be more available to come for meetings, for training, and stuff like that. They will be the nurturers staying back home with the cows. So has enabled the men trust them more, with the activity. When the money starts to be a lot, then the men are interested. But for this 1 and 2 cows, it's what we have observed is that the women are selling the milk. The ones that are participating in the activity, they sell the milk and just use the money for, household issues and other related issues. Over time, also, we have seen increased joint decision making between the man and their wife on how to invest in both in production and with the money that is coming from after sale of the produce. Yeah, so we're seeing less and less of the fight. Not in all cases. This is looks like the general trend now, and information has been key.
Adding to that, Emma, I think the some of the decision making data that we have shared are on a daily sort of management aspects of the farm. So I think what's important as we look into the decision making sort of index is to really see that how many different type of decisions are made across the farming responsibilities, starting from buying an animal or selling an animal, buying a milk, or doing daily sort of other sort of management aspects. So and that really varies in terms of the context, like how the roles kind of distributions are between the different members of the family. So oftentimes what we see that men does do outside work, and because the smallholder dairy is a women's responsibility in terms of management, they are more available in terms of receiving a particular service, such as a vaccine or a deworming services. Either this is provided by a public agency or the services are purchased. But when it comes to, I think, selling an animal, I think the decision-making pattern certainly differs. And even though we have seen more on the joint decision-making aspects when it comes to critical decisions like buying an animal, where more money is involved, or selling an animal, so we see more joint decision-making than decisions those are solely made by women.
Great, thanks for those answers. So this next cluster of questions is for Ermias. So Harinder Markar asks, and others ask about the accessibility of feed additives for producers in low and middle income countries, both economically and logistically.
Yeah, so I think for the feed additives at present are not even available in any countries. I mean, there's only one that's been approved in Europe so far, Europe and South America countries, and it's not yet in production to be able to be used in those countries as well. So this is more a kind of a developing thing that's happening now. And there are also some feed additives that have been developed now that would improve the productivity as well. It makes sense because as you reduce methane is energy, and so you're saving some energy for the animals as well, and that can go into more milk production or better growth as well. So there are some potential feed additives that are under development at the moment that would not be very expensive to produce. And so if we can have those feed additives that are not expensive and we can put it in the diet and actually be able to increase the productivity, so that might offset the cost of those additives as well. Hopefully, it will be more than covering the cost of those feed additives. And also the other thing is that the carbon market is being developed at the moment. And so if farmers are being paid to reduce emissions so that they can sell the carbon that they are reducing to an open market or some sort of a carbon market, then that would make it much more attractive for farmers to be able to incorporate this as well. And the other thing is a lot of retailers are encouraging farmers to adopt those measures that would reduce emissions or improve sustainability, and so that those retailers may sell those things at a premium as well. So there are different ways in which farmers are able to capitalize on these new technologies, but at the moment it is mostly under research. It's not widely deployed. It needs to be approved by different agencies. But I see that because of there's so much interest in climate change and there's so much potential and funding availability now to work on these areas, I see that in the next maybe 3 to 5 years, some of those will make it to the market and become successful, and we'll be able to see it in markets in low and middle income countries as well.
Excellent, thanks for that. So this next question is for everyone. Marjan Leneman asks, with climate change, smallholder livestock farmers and pastoralists must prioritize adaptation and resilience in their livelihood risk strategies. How should they or would they combine this with greenhouse gas emission mitigation for a climate-smart livestock development strategy? That was a rather juicy question, but anyone can jump in and attempt to answer it.
I don't know that I can conclusively or give a conclusive answer, but I think we are starting to see evidence that integrating good animal, livestock, and dairy nutrition practices is actually contributing to greenhouse gases emission, reduce greenhouse gases emission. And so I think taking some of that, evidence into practice would actually be one first step, at least. If I was going to do more interventions in dairy for the next 1 or 2 years, I think that's one of those things I would really, promote. And hopefully we can see even better impact in that area, while farmers are also making more money from the milk that they're producing. Emma, am I there?
Judy, we
Hi,
can hear
yes.
you.
Yeah, does someone else want to take a crack at this question?
Right, Emma, I wanted to say that, many of the, emissions related conversations are still unpacking. So for us, I think we are more interested to understand the emission patterns here in the livestock industry, looking for more collaborations among the other partners. But one thing is very sure that we are hearing a lot of interest from different agencies, academias, private sectors, and regulators as well. And I see that there's some clear sort of goals for this year is to better understand the emission patterns, looking into many of these, I think, technologies, let's say, those are already tested and validated in the developing country context or developed country context. So there's a lot of interest from the private sectors in knowing more of that. So it's also for us is more into understanding and engaging the partners more.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Verita Hansen. And this is for Amias, but anyone can answer if they would like to. So are any of the projects represented on the panel using this or other ration software or apps? And what has the experience been with using that technology? And what farmer or farm profile or size has had the most uptake?
Right. So for us, we are developing those ration information softwares. So the reason was that when we went to Vietnam, that was maybe 8-9 years ago, and we asked what they needed, and we talked with the Minister of Agriculture, and then we went and talked with farmers and extension agents. One of the things that they were saying was they really need a ration information software written in Vietnamese that uses local ingredients as well. So they had access to ration formulation, but it is in English, and also it didn't have the local ingredients that they needed to include in those formulations. So that's when we kind of set to develop those ration formulation software in Vietnamese, and it was done for beef cattle and for dairy cattle. The uptake was so the ministry then distributed this through the extension services as well as the universities that are training students as well. Right now, it's part of the curriculum for the universities it gives them an aid for teaching animal nutrition, as well as once the students are ready to go into the workforce, then they have this ability to use it as well. At the same time, the commercial farming community within Vietnam also got trained on this ration formulation software, so they've been using this. And there has been periodical training sessions that has been organized by the Ministry of Agriculture in Vietnam, where a number of extension agents and farmers are trained on this software. And so the feedback that we've gotten over the years was that there's more and more access of smartphones in rural communities in Vietnam and elsewhere. And so we were encouraged to develop a mobile app so that people would be able to do this without having to have a computer or even the internet. Once you download the app, then you don't need the internet to run it. So that's where things are moving at the moment. We've done through USAID projects similar things in Ethiopia for dairy cattle, and in Burkina Faso for sheep and goats, and for Niger also for sheep and goats. Right now, doing similar things for Cambodia and Laos. And these are, again, they are in the languages. So in Cambodia will be in Khmer, in Laos will be in Lao, in Ethiopia was in Amharic. So making sure that the people who understand those languages will use them instead of relying on English-based kind of ration formulation. And also, it's targeted to the type of animal that they are using. Again, also targeted to the type of feed. Working with ILRI, for example, we've gotten a lot of data on ingredients in Ethiopia, which was included into the software. So if you are using the dairy formulation software in Ethiopia, you have choices of ingredients from different regions of Ethiopia and different seasons as well, so that you choose the most appropriate ingredient for feed formulation. So that's what's been happening. There's a lot of uptake in Vietnam. The others, we're just finishing them up now, so we don't know yet what the uptake is going to be, but this will be measured as it's launched.
So maybe, Emma, I can just add, there is a tool developed also by ILRI, and that is the GFeast. And my colleagues from ILRI are expounding on it on the wall. We have introduced it to a number of the dairy cooperatives that we work with. And that is more designed to inform appropriate feed solutions that farmers can find at local levels. So slightly different from what my colleague presenter is talking about. And yet it's very helpful to the farmers.
Great, thank you. So looking at the time, I think that will be our last question. Do any of the panelists want to offer any final thoughts?
I think I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and also thank you for the other panelists, which is very insightful for me, and learn a lot from the other panelists as well. But I think it's clear that we will continue to work together and learn from experiences in the US and the target countries as well. So yeah, I think we need to keep going.
I'd also want to thank lots of us for listening, and all of us for listening, and many of us for engaging us on the chat. Lots of interesting and mind jogging questions. And I know that one of us has asked about the disaggregation of the data that are provided, further disaggregation. So Emma, through your guidance, you can help me know how I can, pass on that information so that other people can also get it.
Yeah, just echoing with the others. Thank you for pulling this webinar. And I saw in the chat box there's many important and interesting questions. So I think would be interested in going through that list of questions, and I think it will also kind of prompt a lot of interest from our team as well. But thanks to USAID, I think it's what I wanted to say is that there's a lot of other coordinating aspects that we can also think about as we asked about this issues of continued well-being of human, animals, and the ecosystem. So I think a lot of other coordination aspects we can actually work on. For example, the the health and population portfolio and the economic growth portfolio. I think there's a lot to really exchange and make our efforts more coordinated. But thank you for this opportunity.
Great, yeah, thanks. So another big thank you to all of our panelists, Dr. Ermias Kibrab, Judy Odongo, Nurul Siddiqui, and Nelson Owanji, despite having those technical difficulties. I also wanted to acknowledge that folks are joining from a lot of different time zones, some early in the morning, some late in the evening. So big thank you. Also, thank you to our livestock champions at USAID, Terrell Kahan, Mira Chandra, Andrew Bisson, Peter Bowman, and Farzana Ramzan, who's our gender champion, who are instrumental in putting this webinar together and supporting myself as the moderator. And another big thank you to Michael Saltz, Morgan Brown, Shantice McCorkle, and everyone else at KDLT for their technical support. So as we mentioned earlier, we do have that Google form that you can put any additional questions. We did also save all the questions from the chat and the Q&A, and we will attempt to answer as many as we can in a future AgriLinks post. And please continue to look out for blog posts on AgriLinks related to livestock, climate, and gender throughout the rest of this month. Right. Thank you, and have a great day.